We are wrapping up our continuing coverage of this past recent General Assembly session here on Atlanta News First and our digital streaming desk with this edition of Political Update. I'm Tim Darnell, and we're talking with one of my favorite people in the world to talk politics with, Dr. Ben Taylor, who is a very distinguished professor of political science at Kennesaw State University here in Metro Atlanta. Dr. Taylor, yesterday, Wednesday, March 29th, was Sine Die, or I guess the proper Latin pronunciation was or is Sine Die, but with the good old-fashioned Southern Georgia pronunciation, we call it Sine Die down here. But there was a flurry of activity yesterday on Wednesday, March 29th. Talk us a little bit about, we actually did want to talk about three particular bills, and they're all about the kids. It always seems that the issue of children and their welfare and funding is a hot topic every year in every General Assembly session. First of all, let's talk a little bit about school safety, one of those tragic things that we seemingly just never can stop talking about. And the bill that was passed by the General Assembly and I believe has been signed by Governor Kemp will mandate active shooter drills in Georgia schools. Talk with us a little bit about how that came about.
Well, the main reason that the legislature, the proponents of that bill, said that they wanted to do this is because, in their opinion, and as many of us can recall, going to school, you have tornado drills or other kinds of natural disaster drills, fire drills, and emergency drills of various sorts. And their argument was, well, we need something, with the rise of mass shooter events at schools, we need something to do that for that event. We need an emergency preparedness practice for that event. Opponents of that bill said that there are indications. Again, I'm not familiar with this literature, so I can't speak to the veracity of these claims. But the opponents of that bill said that these drills could potentially induce trauma because of the heightened nature of those sorts of events themselves. And of course, you're dealing with small kids in some cases, and so what are the downstream effects of these kinds of things? But in the end, the bill passed. It was an agenda item of the Republican leadership in both chambers. And so, and of course, these kinds of things are pressing for everyone. And this is sort of a response, to take it away from the details of that bill. This would be the kind of response that Republicans want to offer in response to school shootings, whereas Democrats typically are more in favor of trying to regulate gun ownership more stridently. And so this was a way to deal with this issue without looking like they were just throwing their hands up for Republicans, while also Democrats, not being happy about it. So that's sort of what happened there. But of course, the governor signed it, or will sign it very shortly. Is certainly in favor of it. So, like you say, that was a big agenda item, and as the news tells us, seemingly weekly, these kinds of events continue to happen, and this was the way the legislature thought to deal with it.
And talking about the issue of gun rights, this is a gun rights issue, as you said. In addition to school safety, the ironic aspect, or very tragically ironic aspect of it, is that this discussion is coming so soon. Really after those horrific events in Nashville only a few days ago. Did
Right.
that play into this? Did the timing of all this play into the legislative political timing of bringing up the mandatory active shooter drills?
I, maybe it's hard to say really exactly, because I don't think that there was any danger of this not passing. I think that it was
Okay.
going to pass. All indications are, I mean, there are stories are in various news outlets from early days in the legislature that this was something that both the chambers wanted to do. So again, there's no doubt that those kinds of events certainly play into the urgency of these kinds of bills, but I don't know that it specifically had anything to do with this one.
Okay. Oh, along those same lines, we're talking about the issue of schools and education and school safety with Dr. Ben Taylor here on this edition from our Atlanta News First digital streaming desk. One issue that did not make the final cut on Sine Die on Wednesday, March 29th, was the issue of educational vouchers, yet another political, social, economic, educational issue. The Georgia Promise Scholarship Act would have provided $6,500 vouchers to students who are currently enrolled in the bottom 25% performing of Georgia public schools. Republicans were very much in favor of this. There was a solid Democratic minority that was opposed to this, and yet they're really, along with Governor Brian Kemp, who had said he openly supports the idea, yet there was not enough of a strong enough Republican majority to push this across the finish line. Why was that?
Well, it's difficult to say right now. I'm sure people who are in the chamber have their own theories, and perhaps they'll come out in the future and do interviews to tell us a little bit what was going on there. But I would note a couple things. One, yes, this did fail in this session. So the Constitution of Georgia organizes the legislature in biannual assemblies. And so this General Assembly lasts for 2023 and 2024. So while the 2023 session did see this bill fail in the House on a vote for final passage, there was a motion to recommit once the final passage vote failed. The motion to recommit passed, and so that means that the bill goes back and is still technically live for the 2024 session. So it is my strong suspicion that whatever qualms the Republican nays had on this bill, they will be dealt with in the next calendar year. And Governor Kemp also said they passed, the one thing the legislature is required to do is pass a budget. They passed the mid-year budget without much problem, which included the $500 income tax rebate, as well as the property tax rebate and things like this. But they also had to pass a fiscal year 24 budget, which is for the next year. And that budget had some rocky times, and Governor Kemp is on the record as saying there are something, I don't want to quote him exactly, but to paraphrase, significant holes in the budget. And so there is the potential that there could be a special session or some other kind of event. Now, special sessions in Georgia are interesting in that special sessions can only deal with the issues that are specifically in the special session declaration by the governor. So if the governor wanted to tackle vouchers again before the next session, then he could do it in a special session, but it would have to be specifically named. I don't know that it's going to happen that way, but that's just a potentiality. But yes, it did fail. But I suspect that it'll either come back in a special session or most certainly in the next legislative session next January. And whatever issues the Republicans who voted no on it have will certainly be ironed out. Well, I shouldn't say certainly. Will most likely be ironed out.
During some of our streaming coverage on Sine Die on Wednesday, March 29th, we were having a conversation at this very desk with some of our correspondents and reporters. And we mentioned the fact that if you're a parent whose child is enrolled in a underperforming school, you're thinking $6,500 voucher is going to sound pretty good. It's not going to go very far toward homeschooling or enrollment in a private school. And yet there was a solid minority opposing this kind of measure. Why is improving your child's education such a controversial topic?
Well, the issue is, where is the money coming from? And so the advocates for the voucher program, which technically, well, you call it a voucher program, and yes, you could use it for tuition. But this program, again, the details are, again, something that could change. But as written, part of this program is common in some other states. I think I saw there are about 10 other states that use a similar type of educational voucher system, where the voucher does not have to go directly for tuition. It can be used for uh, any number of things that are education related. You think of it like it's like a flexible spending account, but for K through 12 education, effectively. And so advocates of the bill were saying, look, as you point out, we're trying to give choice to parents. We're trying to give options. We're trying to create competition in the K-12 educational sort of marketplace, if you will, so that we can make schools do better. On the other hand, opponents said that, well, what you're effectively doing, as you also point out, that $6,500, while it is a tidy little sum for most people, is not going to go far in paying for tuition, particularly if it's just once a year, because tuition is by semester, and of course it's quite expensive. It's much more than $6,500 a year. So what you're doing is effectively giving some sort of a pay for play system for wealthier parents who might already send their kids to a private school. And so now they're just to have that little bit of a buffer, or they could use it for other things like tutoring or books or whatever else because of the nature of the program. And then the question becomes, where's the money come from? Because what you're doing is taking public dollars, which would go to public school systems, and then giving it to private school entities that have no oversight by the state or very limited oversight by the state. And if the goal is to improve education, how are we improving education if we have no oversight, particularly curricular oversight of private schools? You can't, there's no way to measure effectiveness in that context. And so that was the big issue. And I think, again, I don't know the details, having not been in the legislature myself, but I think that what I've read and what I understand from folks who have been down at the Capitol is that the big concern for Republican leaders was having I was not Republican leaders, but Republicans who voted against it, was these were people who were very connected to their local school systems. Some of them had been on school boards themselves, or their superintendents were very, very concerned based on the way the money could be allocated based on the Georgia milestones test. There were just some problems there. So again, I think whatever problems there are could be ironed out between now and the next session. And I have no doubt that there is some version of this will show back up again. But there's work to do for sure. Although I would also point out this is one of the rare times that Democrats have been able to claim any sort of victory in their entire time in the minority since 2005, really. And so it's an interesting turn of events.
It is interesting, and money, we're talking money and educational priorities here on Atlanta News First Digital Desk with Dr. Ben Taylor, Professor of Political Science at Kennesaw State University, wrapping up this past legislative session that ended on Wednesday, March 29th. The last topic we really wanted to talk about ties in with what we've been talking about for the last few minutes or so, and that is education, school funding, and the issue of legalized online gambling. You and I had multiple interviews and multiple conversations about whether or not this issue was finally going to make it across the finish line legislatively and politically. It did not. It did get a kind of a last minute boost on crossover day when a completely unrelated bill was hijacked with another attempt to provide a legalized form of sports betting in Georgia. As I understand it, constitutionally, all money that is generated through gaming, through the Georgia lottery, has to go toward education, with literally hundreds of billions of dollars possibly at stake to help fully fund Georgia's Hope Scholarship. Why was this issue still falling short yet again this year?
Well, I think in our previous conversations, I said this, and I think the case is still there that, so I saw that Lieutenant Governor Jones came out and became I would say, a strong proponent of sports betting. But the issue is Governor Kemp was not entirely full throated in his support. And again, like if you think back to the Georgia lottery's creation in 1992, it took an enterprising politician, in this case Zell Miller, who really saw this as an opportunity to one, win the 1990 gubernatorial election, but also do some policy things he wanted to in education. And I think that the the reason that you saw it falter was there are too many ideas about how to do sports betting and what should be done and when it should be done and how it should be done. And I think that in the end, there will have to be some compromises made, and it'll have to take leadership among the Republican leaders of the House and Senate who really want to see this done. But again, constituencies within the Republican Party are also wary of this. You have people who have moral concerns or ethical concerns about legalizing sports gambling, but the business community sees it as a real opportunity. So there's a lot of competition within potential Republican constituencies, and so right now we are still really waiting on a politician with a big enough platform who also wants to really take this issue head on in the way that Governor Miller did in 1990 and 92. And until that happens, it's probably going to languish a bit. But I think
Are
this
we
is
going to
also
see this
something
again
like
next year?
We could definitely see it again next year. Yes, and I think that's what I was going to say. Is I think that it is like much like the voucher program. There's a steam behind it. There's some obvious momentum, and as we think about budgets in the future and potential economic downturns and what that will do to state budgets, my sense is that if we get to June and we see that state revenues are down some 7 to 8, 9, 10% over year, then you'll see people who get a little bit more excited about the potentiality of sports betting for education funding. So, but again, it may not take an economic downturn either. It may just be the sort of the confluence of events, enterprising politician, motivated, aligned constituencies, as well as a willing set of, I should also say, Democratic members of. One of the reasons that it failed this year too was that the Senate could not get Democratic votes for that bill, and Democrats generally, as a class of people, are pretty good with sports betting as a policy, particularly fun education.
Right. I mean,
But
you
they
would
wouldn't
think it
play
would be
ball.
kind of bipartisan, really.
Right, exactly. And that's what I think Lieutenant Governor Jones thought. But given other things that were going on in the session, Democrats decided, well, if this is what Republicans want, let Republicans do it. And they couldn't. So,
Well, and that was the issue we were talking about on Wednesday during our streaming coverage. There was a lot of Democratic Party outrage over the issue of prohibiting certain gender affirming surgeries. And perhaps that was one reason why Democratic minority withheld their support for something that they had, publicly endorsed.
right, exactly. Their position politically is, if Republicans don't want our input on bills that affect, potentially, sort of these minority communities, right? Then we're not going to help them do things they want to do that are going to make them look good in the end anyway. Like everybody's going to get credit for it, but Republicans are in the leadership, so they're going to get the most credit. And so Democrats say, well, if you won't listen to us on issues that we care about deeply, then we're not going to help you pass things that are going to make you look good. That's basically the political calculation that they would have.
And this is Georgia, the world of Georgia politics, and is one of the most fascinating, dynamic in the nation. And we are wrapping up our conversation with Dr. Ben Taylor from Kennesaw State University, a very distinguished political science professor, one of our favorite people to speak with here on Atlanta News First. And we will continue to cover the political and legislative situation here in Georgia. Thanks to Dr. Taylor. Thanks to all of you for watching this edition of Atlanta News First on our digital streaming desk.